first you have to get true buy-in to why this matters. And, not just the moral reason behind it, but the business imperative, because your audience is changing, and you're gonna you're gonna become a dinosaur if you don't reflect the people you're serving.
When you look across the landscape of organizations facing issues of diversity, equity, and inclusion, most are just trying to figure it out. Few have the clarity and commitment that's happening over at NPR. To get a first-hand view of this progressive change agenda, we sat down with Chief Marketing Officer Michael Smith, and the conversation that unfolded might be considered a masterclass in establishing a long-term diversity, equity, and inclusion agenda.
Well, my name is Michael Smith. I am from all over the world. I was actually born in Red Deer, Alberta, Canada, but my family is from Jamaica, where I spent most of my childhood. And then I've lived all over the United States, from upstate New York to California to the Midwest. I lived in Singapore and Hong Kong, and now I live in Western New Jersey on my way to Washington, D.C. in a couple of weeks.
I like to open these interviews with a little icebreaker question. The first one comes from the Actually Curious Culture Edition. And I picked this one special for you. What's your most recommended book or podcast?
I'd say it's this one I've been listening to a lot recently called Philosophize This. I love philosophy, and I've been really deep into the Frankfurt School of Philosophies recently, which is really about postmodernism and structuralism, and how established structures are really very responsible for the ways things happen in society more than individuals. And that really plays into a lot of the conversations today about critical race theory and structural racism and systemic racism. And but so I've been really geeking out on postmodern philosophy.
That's amazing. So take us to the start of your career. What's going through the mind of a 20-something Michael Smith?
Well, I think when I was even going back to high school, I always loved television and loved entertainment, just what I did. I mean, I watched TV when I did my homework. I was kind of probably the early ADD type kid, but I just loved media and entertainment, and I wanted to have something to do with it. I didn't know how. My mom was a nurse, and so I didn't have any connections to the industry. And I give a lot of credit to. We talked about diversity, to the San Francisco Chronicle Foundation, which is a newspaper foundation that had created a minority internship program back in the 80s. And the idea was to help kids of color get exposure to the business. And so if it wasn't for that, I don't think I would have, gotten my foot in the door at the TV station that they owned. And then that led to other internships that I got in the industry. And what's really driven me throughout my career has been a couple of things. One has been this long-term change in the way people have engaged and consumed content. I've always been fascinated by that. From broadcast TV to streaming, I've just always been interested in how that's been evolving. And then the second piece is how the audiences themselves have evolved in terms of the changes in our culture, and more specifically in the demographics of who's consuming content. Somebody told me this years ago, is if you stay on the cutting edge of both of those things, you will always hopefully be employed and be successful in the business. So NPR, it was a culmination, I think, of both trends. One, the digital audio, on-demand audio trend, podcasting is one of the hottest places in the business, and then the change in demographics and the need of media content to respond to the need to reflect America was something that I was very inspired by, and looking for an organization that was committed to that. And that is NPR's number one priority, is to really diversify our audience to better reflect and serve America. And our commitment right now is to very much reflect, all of America, and put the public back into national public radio.
The next question I have, just to tease, is around a statement that John Lansing's put out in September called "Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion is not a project; it's our work."
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like you might be able to touch on the heritage through this questioning. So
yeah, I think the reason why our new CEO John Lansing called out diversity, equity, inclusion as being part of our work is if you think about what NPR is all about. I mean, we came out of the Great Society programs in the 1960s, where the government set up the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, which helped launch NPR and PBS. And the mission was to create media resources that weren't being fed, or to serve things that weren't being fed by the commercial media. And so that's always been our mission, and it's been to create it's been more informed public through this trusted information. If you go back to 1971 when we launched, we were our audience was pretty much in line with the United States. We had about an 80% white audience, 20% diverse audience, and that was similar to the country. But if you look at us today, our radio audience is still about 80-20. And the country has changed. It's about 60-40, and for younger people, it's almost 50-50. So we realized that we'd gotten out of sync with America, and so we've just been redoubling our efforts to make younger, more diverse people aware of the work that we do, because we think it's really in line with a lot of the values and things that they that they're concerned with. But unfortunately, a lot of them are not aware that NPR is out there. And we've had great success in podcasting, because that's the platform that younger people really resonate with. It's on demand. They listen on their smartphones, and we found that our podcast content, whether it's shows like How I Built This or Planet Money or Code Switch, It's Been a Minute, those shows actually have about a 40-45% people of color audience.
So tell us what it looks like on the inside, and what are some of the results that you're seeing there?
I think when you think about diversity and inclusion across U.S. companies, I think that there are two things going on, and they're both related to this question of the pipeline. And one is getting more people into the pipeline, and then two is, once they're in the pipeline, making sure that they actually make it through and thrive. And that's the kind of stuff that we've been focusing on in recruiting and finding people and getting them into the organization. But the part that it's not as noticed as much is that once people do get into organizations, why are they leaving? Was turnover higher for people of color? Why are they not rising?
What kind of systems, what support, what processes are needed to enact holistic change?
Yeah, I think what you see C-suite leaders need to do to really make diversity a reality is, first you have to get true buy-in to why this matters, and not just the moral reason behind it, but the business imperative, because your audience is changing, and you're gonna become a dinosaur if you don't reflect the people you're serving. It's a combination of bringing people into your organization, but it's more importantly, what do you do once they're in the organization? Are you making people feel valued? Are you making people feel like there's a plan to really include them? They're not just being used as a token or something, a checkbox. You really understand how you need to reorient and rethink your business to respond to your changing audience, and how to leverage these new voices that are around the table.
I'd like to know, have you ever experienced discrimination in your professional life? What did it look like, and how did you handle it?
The biggest thing that I've always faced, I think a lot of people of color obviously have faced, is just being underestimated and being undervalued and marginalized in what people think your potential could be. And it's happened to me a lot, so many times in my career where I was not the first person thought of for a promotion or for an opportunity, and then I was passed over, and then you wait a couple of years, and then the person who got the job fails, and then they kind of come back and say, oh, you're still here. you want a shot?
What legacy do you mean to leave behind?
Somebody that was committed to the basic tenet that I think that especially as an immigrant, that brought us all to America, which is an opportunity to succeed and pursue and thrive in whatever you want to accomplish, unencumbered by your class or your race, your background, which is why I think people come to the United States, to escape caste systems where they just don't see opportunities for themselves. And that's America's promise. It's not a promise that is fully realized. And so if you can be remembered as somebody who was on the right side of getting America closer to that ideal, then I think that would be a great way to be remembered.